The Galactic Empire had existed for more than 10,000 years. It ruled over thousands of star systems, millions of worlds, and countless alien species. To its rulers, the galaxy was already mapped, measured, and mastered. Every new race they found followed the same pattern. First, the Empire's deep space sensors detected their ships. Second, the Imperial fleet arrived to welcome them. Third, the newcomers were brought under the Empire's guidance, sometimes willingly, sometimes not. It was an old routine. The Empire's leaders could predict exactly how any first meeting would go. That was why, on the day the Imperial Border Command detected an unknown fleet approaching, no one felt nervous. The alert went out, the diplomats polished their speeches, and the fleet prepared to put on a show. "Designation, humanity," said Admiral Threx, looking at the data scrolling across the holoscreen in his command chamber. "A young race from a small spiral arm, pre-hyperlane civilization until a few centuries ago. This should be quick." The officers around him nodded. To them, this was just another entry in the logbook. As the unknown fleet drew closer, Imperial analysts studied the images. 10 ships, medium size, heat signatures not especially impressive, hulls made from dense alloys, old-fashioned compared to the Empire's sleek crystal composites. Even their shapes were strange, boxy in some cases, sharp-edged in others, like each ship had been designed for a different purpose, rather than for beauty. Commander Yuln, the head of Fleet Presentation Protocol, gave a satisfied smile. "They will see the might of the Empire, and they will bow. It always happens." Admiral. Threx glanced once more at the incoming vessels. They didn't look dangerous. In fact, they looked, well, crude. But there was something about them that he couldn't quite name. Something in the way they moved, steady and unhurried, like they didn't care how impressive they seemed. The humans crossed the Imperial border without hesitation. No emergency beacons, no requests for safe passage, just a calm signal sent to the Empire's communication channels. The message was short. "Hello, Galactic Empire. We're the people of Earth. Mind if we drop by?" The first meeting, the meeting point, was a neutral orbit near a gas giant in the Zelvra system. The Empire arrived first, of course. Dozens of massive Imperial warships hung in space, their crystal hulls shining in the system's twin suns. The central flagship, the Radiance of Eternity, was larger than a small city. It was designed to inspire awe, and it usually did. The human ships arrived in a loose formation. Their hulls were painted in a mix of colors, gray, white, navy blue, with strange markings on the sides. Some had rotating sections for artificial gravity. Others had open framework designs that showed machinery inside. To Imperial eyes, it was a mess, a patchwork fleet with no uniform style. The Empire valued symmetry and elegance. These humans clearly didn't. The Imperial fleet opened a communication channel. A tall, four-armed alien with silver skin appeared on the humans' screens. His voice was deep and formal. "I am Admiral Threx of the Galactic Empire," he announced. "You are entering the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Prepare to be escorted to our capital for orientation." On the human flagship, a ship called Vigilant Dawn, Captain Sofia Rivera leaned back in her chair and raised an eyebrow. She was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and an easy smile. She glanced at her crew before replying. "Orientation?" she said. "Like a tourist brochure? Because we didn't bring any travel guides." Her tone was friendly, but something in it made Admiral Threx pause. "This is a formal welcome," he said slowly. "It is customary for all new civilizations to be shown the wonders of the Empire so they may understand our greatness." Rivera grinned. "Oh, I'm sure it's great, but we've seen some pretty amazing things ourselves. Let's see if you can surprise us." The channel went silent for a second. Around the Imperial Bridge, officers exchanged puzzled looks. Was this disrespect or just strange humor? Small talk, human style. While the fleets moved toward the capital's hyperlane, open channels were kept for diplomatic chatter. Usually, the newcomers asked nervous questions or made polite compliments. The humans didn't. Instead, they asked about energy efficiency in the Imperial fleet's engines. They asked if the crystal hulls were hard to clean. They joked about how shiny everything looked, like a car show on steroids. One human engineer even asked in a completely serious tone, "So, do you guys still use those old plasma conduits that leak radiation? Or did you upgrade already?" The Imperial officers didn't know how to respond. These weren't insults exactly. The humans seemed genuinely curious, but the tone was too casual, too familiar. At one point, Commander Yuln tried to explain the grandeur of the Empire's flagship fleet. "Each of our capital ships has been in service for over 1,000 years, he boasted. Captain Rivera's voice came back instantly. 1,000 years? Wow. Must be a nightmare to keep the parts from rusting. Some of the human crew chuckled audibly in the background, the Empire's confusion. By the time they reached the first hyperlane gate, the Imperial delegation was unsettled. The humans weren't afraid, they weren't overwhelmed, and they certainly weren't acting like a lesser civilization. It was the opposite. The humans treated the meeting like a casual neighborly visit, occasionally making fun of the Empire's ships while asking oddly technical questions. Admiral Threx called a private meeting with his senior staff. "They do not act like others," he said, folding his forearms. "Every other species greets us with either fear or reverence. These humans do neither." "They are mocking us," Commander Yuln said bitterly. "Perhaps," Threx replied. "Or perhaps they simply have no concept of our authority. Either way, the Emperor will want to see them himself." On board the Vigilant Dawn. Meanwhile, on the human flagship, Captain Rivera relaxed in the command chair as her crew monitored the Imperial ships. "Think they like us yet?" asked Lieutenant Harris, a young pilot with a mischievous grin. Rivera smirked. "They're still trying to figure us out." "That's good. Means they haven't put us in a neat little box yet." "Sir," said Chief Engineer Patel from the engineering console, "their engine output is impressive, but the waste heat management is inefficient. They could improve it by at least 20% if they—" Rivera held up a hand. "Save it for later, Patel. First impressions matter, and I think we've made ours." Her crew laughed. First glimpse of the capital. As they exited the final hyperlane, the Imperial capital filled their view screens. It was a planet-wide city, surrounded by rings of orbital stations, shipyards, and glittering defensive platforms. The sky was dotted with countless ships moving in perfect formation. To most visitors, it was overwhelming, proof of the Empire's supreme power. On the Vigilant Dawn, there was a moment of silence as the humans took it in. Then Lieutenant Harris said, "Looks like Coruscant had a baby with a Christmas tree." Rivera chuckled. "Yeah, let's go meet the neighbors." That day, as the human fleet approached the Imperial Palace station, the stage was set for one of the strangest first contacts in galactic history, a meeting where one side expected awe and obedience, and the other brought curiosity, humor, and a habit of pointing out flaws in the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The Empire thought it knew exactly how this story would go. The humans were about to prove them wrong. The human fleet was escorted into a wide, circular docking area above the Imperial capital. Imperial ships moved like dancers in a grand performance, their crystal hulls reflecting the golden light of the system's sun. Everything about the scene was meant to impress. From the control tower, Commander Yuln stood with his hands clasped behind his back. "Watch closely," he told a young officer beside him. "This is the part where they finally realize their place in the galaxy." Below them, the human ships approached the docking lanes and immediately began adjusting their formations in odd ways. Instead of following the exact paths marked by Imperial guidance beacons, They shifted slightly, spacing themselves for easier maneuvering. The Vigilant Dawn even slowed down to let one of the smaller ships swing around for a better angle. To Imperial eyes, it looked messy and uncoordinated. But on the human side, it was simply practical. Inside the Vigilant Dawn, Captain Rivera was giving calm instructions. "All right, people, let's not scratch the fancy paint on these guys' docking rings. Harris, give the Pathfinder some room. Their sensors are a little more sensitive to glare. Patel, watch our power levels so we don't overload their systems." Lieutenant Harris grinned. "You'd think they'd design docking lanes wider than a sewing needle." Patel chuckled over the comm. "Maybe they wanted to make sure only the best pilots could get in." Rivera smirked. "Or they like watching visitors sweat." The official welcome. Once the ships were docked, the humans were invited to the Imperial Grand Hall, a massive open chamber inside the palace station. Tall pillars carved from translucent crystal rose toward a ceiling painted with the history of the Empire. Hundreds of alien dignitaries lined the sides, wearing robes, jewels, and intricate armor. The humans entered in plain uniforms, their boots clicking on the polished floor. They didn't look around in awe. They looked around in curiosity, and maybe a little amusement. Admiral Threx stepped forward. His silver skin glowed faintly under the hall's lighting. "People of Earth," he began in a deep, formal voice, "welcome to the heart of the Galactic Empire. You stand among the greatest achievements of civilization. Our history stretches across millennia. Our fleets span the stars. Our wisdom guides countless worlds." Captain Rivera tilted her head slightly. "That's impressive," she said, smiling politely. "But where's your recycling plant?" The Admiral blinked. "Our recycling plant?" "Yes," Rivera replied. "With this many people on one station, you must have an incredible waste management system. I'd love to see it." Murmurs rippled through the hall. The Imperial Court wasn't used to guests ignoring grand speeches to ask about garbage. Polite, but poking. The conversation moved to a long reception table where food from across the Empire was served. Gleaming dishes held brightly colored fruits, steaming bowls of alien grains, and plates of roasted meats from exotic worlds. The humans sampled everything with genuine interest, but they also asked questions that made the hosts shift uncomfortably. "This drink is nice," said Lieutenant Harris, holding up a glass of sparkling blue liquid. "But the carbonation seems uneven. Do you store these in pressure tanks or something?" Engineer Patel, examining a small alien device on the table, asked, "Your food heaters run on what power source? Feels like you could save a lot of energy?" Bye. Rivera, meanwhile, was in a light conversation with an alien noble about the station's architecture. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "But isn't crystal this thin, vulnerable to microfractures? A strong enough temperature change could—" The noble nearly dropped his glass. "Private Imperial reactions up on the observation balcony," several Imperial Council members whispered urgently. "They're too casual," one said. "They don't fear us at all. They mock us," another muttered. "Their tone is disrespectful." But one older counselor, a small, six-eyed alien with a slow, measured voice, shook his head. "Not disrespect," he said quietly. "They are unshaken. They treat us as equals. And they notice things others overlook." A tour with surprises to impress the humans further, Admiral Threx arranged a tour of the palace station's engineering sector. This was a rare honor. Most new civilizations weren't shown the Empire's technical heart until years after joining. Escorted by guards, the human delegation entered a massive chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits, humming, generators, and vast coolant reservoirs. Rivera's eyes lit up, but not in awe, in analysis. Patel was already muttering under his breath, pointing at various components. "This is old," Patel whispered. beautifully maintained, but old. Some of these designs are centuries out of date. Keep it down, Rivera murmured, though. She was smiling. The Imperial Chief Engineer approached proudly. These systems have powered the palace for over 1,000 years without failure, he declared. Impressive, Rivera admitted. Then she glanced at a junction pipe. But that seal looks like it's starting to degrade. Do you have a backup in place? The chief engineer's smile froze. Of course, he said stiffly. The Emperor's interest news of the humans' comments. Their strange blend of politeness and bluntness traveled quickly through the station. By the end of the day, the Emperor himself had heard. The Emperor was not easily surprised. In his centuries of rule, he had seen countless species grovel before him, and a few foolish enough to challenge him. But a species that joked, questioned, and poked holes in the Empire's image on their very first day? That was new. Bring them to me, the Emperor ordered. I wish to see this humanity for myself. Back on the Vigilant Dawn that evening, the human delegation returned to their flagship. The mood was light. They're either annoyed or fascinated, Harris said, stretching in his chair. Probably both, Rivera replied. Which is perfect, keeps them curious. Patel leaned back, hands behind his head. Did you see their coolant system? If we gave them a few tweaks, they could double efficiency. Rivera nodded thoughtfully. Not yet. Let's see how far they'll go before asking us for help. A shift in the air. The next morning, Imperial messengers arrived with the summons. The Emperor would see the humans at once. Rivera stood at the viewport looking down at the endless city lights of the planet below. Well, she said with a small smile, either we're in trouble or we're making history. The crew exchanged amused glances. Trouble and history for humans often came together, and so, escorted by a full honor guard, the humans left their ship for the meeting that would define their place in the galaxy and possibly change the Empire itself. They had no fear, no hesitation, and no intention of pretending to be impressed. The palace station's central tower rose like a shining spear into the black of space. At the very top was the Imperial Audience Chamber, the most secure and most beautiful room in the entire Galactic Empire. Few beings ever saw it in person. Now, a small group of humans was being escorted there. Captain Sofia Rivera walked at the front, hands relaxed at her sides. Behind her were Lieutenant Harris, Chief Engineer Patel, and two more members of her crew. Around them, tall Imperial guards in polished armor moved in perfect formation. The corridor was lined with high windows showing the glow of the capital world below. Between the windows stood massive statues of past emperors, carved from crystal and stone. The guards expected their guests to be impressed. "Those are nice," Harris whispered to Patel, nodding at one of the towering statues. "But they all look like they're judging me." Patel grinned. "Probably because they are." Rivera didn't say anything, but the corner of her mouth twitched. The Emperor's entrance. The great doors to the audience chamber opened with a deep, resonating hum. Inside, the room was enormous, a circular hall with a floor of polished black stone reflecting the starfield projected above. A wide staircase led up to the Emperor's throne, which was carved from a single massive crystal, glowing faintly with inner light. Around the chamber stood the Imperial court, advisors, nobles, high-ranking officers, and alien dignitaries from across the Empire. All eyes turned toward the humans. A deep chime rang, and the Emperor entered. He was tall, almost 3 meters, with skin like smooth obsidian and eyes that shone gold. His long robes shimmered with embedded starlight threads, and a crown of fine metal circled his brow. When he moved, the room seemed to hold its breath. He stopped before his throne and regarded the humans for a long moment before speaking. People of Earth, his voice carried easily across the chamber, you stand before the ruler of the Galactic Empire. I have heard unusual reports of your arrival. Rivera met his gaze without flinching. We heard unusual reports about you, too. Nice place, by the way. Must be expensive to keep the lights on. A ripple of shocked murmurs moved through the court. No one spoke to the Emperor like that. Testing words. The Emperor tilted his head slightly. You are not afraid, Rivera shrugged. Why would we be? You haven't given us a reason. Most civilizations, the Emperor said slowly, when they first meet the Empire, are humbled. They see our achievements, our power, our history, and they are silent in awe. Harris leaned slightly toward Rivera and whispered, just loud enough for the court to hear. Guess we didn't read the script. Patel coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed, but there was no anger, only curiosity. You mock us openly, yet your ships are unusual. Your technology, strange. Why do you think you can speak as equals? Rivera smiled faintly. Because we are equals. Every civilization has strengths and weaknesses. Yours is power and tradition. Ours is seeing things differently. Walking through the chamber. Instead of standing still, Rivera began walking slowly across the chamber floor, her boots clicking on the stone. She looked at the towering crystal pillars, the enormous banners, the floor's perfect polish. This is all beautiful, she said, but beauty doesn't mean perfection. I've seen stations collapse because everyone was too busy admiring the design to notice the cracks in the supports. The Emperor's voice deepened. Do you believe there are cracks in the Empire? Rivera glanced over her shoulder at him. Every system has cracks. The difference is whether you notice them in time. An unplanned demonstration. One of the court engineers stepped forward, clearly irritated. This is nonsense. The palace station is flawless. It has stood for 1,000 years without a single... A faint ping echoed in the chamber. Patel bent down, picked up a small shard of crystal from the edge of the staircase and held it up. Looks like this came loose. Probably nothing serious. But if I were you, I'd check the bonding seal along the lower edges. The court gasped. Several officials looked nervously at the Emperor. Rivera raised her eyebrows. Cracks, she said simply. The Emperor's reaction. For a long moment, the Emperor said nothing. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. A deep, rumbling sound that rolled through the hall. You are bold, he said finally. Few would come into my presence and point out flaws in my house. Fewer still would be right. He looked toward his chief engineer. Inspect the lower edges. If there are weaknesses, repair them. The engineer bowed deeply and hurried away. The Emperor turned his gaze back to the humans. Perhaps your eyes do see what ours do not. A different kind of. Conversation. The tone in the room shifted. Instead of formal declarations, the meeting became a strange blend of diplomacy and technical discussion. The Emperor asked about human engineering methods. Patel explained how Earth ships balanced redundancy with flexibility. Harris described human navigation systems in a way that made several Imperial officers frown thoughtfully. Rivera, in turn, asked about the Empire's social systems, trade routes, and station upkeep. She listened carefully, but didn't hesitate to ask if something really made sense or was just tradition. At one point, she said, "Tradition's fine, but if it stops you from improving, it becomes a chain instead of a foundation." The Emperor didn't argue. The offer. After an hour of conversation, the Emperor leaned back in his throne. Captain, Rivera, you have not come here to bow. You have come here to teach, though you disguise it in humor. Rivera gave a half smile. We came here to meet our neighbors. Teaching's optional. The Emperor's gold eyes gleamed. Then perhaps I should give you a challenge. Walk my stations, see my worlds, If you find fault, tell me. If you find something better, show me. I will not be insulted if you are right." Rivera didn't hesitate. "Deal." The court erupted into murmurs again, but the Emperor raised a hand for silence, a quiet victory. As the humans were escorted out of the chamber, Harris leaned toward Rivera. "So, we just got hired to criticize the most powerful empire in the galaxy?" Rivera smirked. "Looks that way." Patel shook his head in disbelief. "This is going to be fun." Behind them, in the vast audience chamber, the Emperor sat in thought. The humans were unlike any species he had ever met, unafraid, unshaken, and unwilling to be dazzled by surface beauty. They saw deeper. The Emperor's challenge spread across the imperial capital within hours. By the next day, everyone knew that the strange new species, humans, had been invited to travel through the Empire's stations and worlds. Some thought it was an honor. Others whispered it was an insult, letting outsiders judge the greatest civilization in the galaxy. Captain Sofia Rivera didn't care what they thought. She had a mission now, and humans loved missions that let them explore. The Vigilant Dawn left the palace station with a small imperial escort, 3 elegant ships shaped like silver crescents. On board, Rivera and her crew prepared for their first stop, the Orvanus Orbital Market, one of the largest trade hubs in the Empire. The floating marketplace. The Orvanus Market was a massive ring-shaped station orbiting a lush green planet. Its outer edge was lined with docking bays, while the inner circle was filled with open plazas, towering market halls, and brightly lit trade avenues. From space, it was beautiful, like a jewel floating in the void. On arrival, the humans were greeted by Market Overseer Vethel, a tall, insect-like alien with polished chitin and ceremonial robes. "Welcome, people of Earth," Vethel said with pride. "This station handles trade from over 1,000 worlds. Every day, goods worth entire planetary economies pass through here. You will not find a more efficient trading center anywhere in the galaxy." Rivera smiled politely. "It's impressive. Let's take a look." First impressions and comments. The humans wandered through the market's wide corridors. Vendors of every species sold fruits that glowed faintly, fabrics that shifted colors, tools that could fold into smaller tools, and music crystals that played melodies without instruments. Harris picked up a small alien device and examined it. "Nice work," he said to the vendor, "but the casing's not heat-resistant. Ever get complaints about it melting?" The vendor blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. Patel stopped in front of a massive cargo lift and tilted his head. "Why? Are your freight lanes so narrow? You could move twice as much cargo if you widened them and used a split-flow system." Rivera took in the whole scene, noting how the docking bays were crowded with ships waiting for clearance. "Your docking process is slowing you down," she told Vethel. "You've got ships idling for hours when you could redesign the schedule to cut that in half." Vethel stiffened. "Our system is the most efficient in the Empire." "Maybe in the Empire," Rivera said lightly, "but not in the galaxy." The test overseer, Vethel, perhaps out of irritation, challenged the humans. "If your ways are so much better, prove it." Rivera nodded. "All right, give us 1 docking lane for the day. We'll handle the scheduling. You keep the others running, your way." By the end of the day, the results spoke for themselves. The human-managed lane processed 43% more ships than any other. Cargo movement was faster, and fuel waste from idling dropped sharply. Vethel was silent for a long moment. "You will share your methods?" he asked at last. Rivera smiled. "Of course. That's why we point these things out." A pattern forms. The next stop was the Karen Habitat Complex, a cluster of massive rotating cylinders that housed millions of Imperial citizens in simulated Earth-like environments. The Imperial guide explained proudly how the habitats had been running smoothly for centuries. Patel, however, noticed something odd about the air circulation systems. You're losing a lot of oxygen efficiency, he said. If you reroute the secondary filters, you could extend filter life by 5 years. The guide frowned. That is possible, but it would require rewiring large sections of the habitat. Yeah, Patel said cheerfully. That's called maintenance. Rivera added, better a little work now than a disaster later. Winning over the skeptics at first, most Imperial officials reacted the same way. Shock at being criticized, irritation at being told they could do better. But when they tested the human suggestions, the results were hard to ignore. Stations ran smoother, cargo moved faster, energy use dropped, food production increased in several agricultural sectors. The humans never offered their ideas in a superior tone. They joked, they teased, they asked questions that made people think. But behind the humor, their advice was practical. And it worked. The cultural exchange, it wasn't all engineering talk. The humans also visited art halls, music performances, and cultural festivals. They praised what they liked but didn't pretend to enjoy everything. At one theater, Harris whispered to Rivera during an elaborate imperial opera, "Is it just me? Or is this 5 hours of someone singing about paperwork?" Rivera whispered back, "Shh. They take their paperwork seriously." But later, when asked their opinion, the humans suggested mixing traditional performances with shorter, modern variations to attract younger audiences. Surprisingly, some artists agreed. The Emperor watches reports from across the Empire reached the Emperor daily. At first, he read them with mild amusement. But as the weeks went by, his amusement turned into deep interest. Everywhere the humans went, they found ways to improve things. And everywhere they went, people slowly stopped seeing them as rude outsiders and started seeing them as useful allies. The Emperor began to wonder, was their casual confidence simply part of their nature, or was it a deliberate tool? A visit to a military dockyard. The final stop before returning to the capital was a massive military dockyard in the Ralthus sector. Rows of Imperial warships floated in construction bays, their crystal hulls gleaming under floodlights. The dockmaster gave the humans a proud tour, pointing out the defensive upgrades, the advanced targeting systems, and the 1,000-year-old ship designs that had served the Empire faithfully. Rivera listened politely, then asked, "Why do you build them the same way every time?" The dockmaster frowned. "Because this design has been tested in battle for centuries. It is perfect." Patel walked over to a schematic and pointed. "This section here, if you rearrange the internal compartments, you can add a secondary shield generator without increasing mass." The dockmaster looked at him skeptically. "Impossible." "Not impossible," Patel said. "Just not the way you've been doing it. A small demonstration." The humans offered to modify one of the smaller patrol ships. Working alongside Imperial engineers, they made changes over 2 days. When tested, the ship's power efficiency rose by 15% and its shield recharge rate nearly doubled. The dockmaster stared at the readings. "I have been in this dockyard for 200 years, he said slowly. "I have never seen improvements. Like this." Rivera clapped him on the shoulder. "Guess it's a good thing we stopped by." Heading back to the capital by the time the vigilant dawn set course for the Imperial capital again, news of the humans' mockery had taken on a new meaning. It wasn't mindless disrespect. It was a way of challenging without hostility, of forcing people to think in new ways. On the bridge, Harris leaned back in his chair. "So you think the Emperor's gonna like our report?" Rivera smiled faintly. "If he doesn't, he's not the leader I think he is." The grand hall of the Galactic Council was filled with whispers. Representatives from hundreds of alien species sat in curved rows, all focused on the central stage. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire, Lord Zarek, stood tall, his golden robe glimmering under the bright lights. His eyes were fixed on the humans who had just entered. The humans walked in with slow, confident steps. Admiral Rachel Hayes led the delegation, wearing a simple black uniform with the Earth emblem on her chest. Behind her walked scientists, engineers, and diplomats. They carried no weapons, no guards, only smiles that made the aliens uneasy. Zarek cleared his throat, his deep voice echoing. "Humans," he began, "you have mocked the Empire for too long. Your ships defy our scans. Your technology baffles our scientists, and your humor insults our honor." Rachel tilted her head and replied, "We never meant to insult, Your Majesty. We only point out the truth. If the truth feels like mockery, perhaps the problem is not us." A ripple of murmurs spread through the alien crowd. The Emperor's jaw tightened. The test of worth one of Zarek's advisors stepped forward. His insectoid body shimmered in green light. "We demand proof. If humans claim to be superior in wisdom and technology, then demonstrate it before the Council. A challenge of knowledge." Rachel exchanged glances with her team. "A challenge? We accept." The council chamber shifted. Holographic projectors rose from the floor, creating shimmering displays of ancient star maps, mathematical puzzles, and engineering designs. The test would cover navigation, physics, diplomacy, and creative problem-solving. For the next hours, humans moved through each task with ease. Where others hesitated, they improvised. When the maps showed incomplete data, the humans filled in the missing stars using ancient Earth methods by calculating orbits and distances manually. When asked to design a planetary energy grid, the humans built a model that was not only more efficient than the Empire's, but also cheaper and faster to construct. Aliens watched in silence, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief. The Emperor's face was unreadable, the unexpected. Question. Finally, the last test came. "This is the question no species has ever solved," the insectoid advisor announced, his antennae twitching. The hologram showed a simple puzzle. 3 interlocking rings, each connected to the others in such a way that no one could separate them without breaking the structure. Rachel studied it for a moment, then smiled. "You've been trying to pull the rings apart," she said. "But the answer is not separation. The answer is change." She asked for heat and pressure tools. Slowly, she reshaped one ring so it could slip through the others, without breaking anything. The hologram flashed green. Test passed. Gasps filled the hall. The puzzle had stood for centuries, and the humans solved it in minutes. The Council decides, when the results were shown, humanity's score was perfect, the first in galactic history. The Council murmured among themselves, and finally the Speaker of the Council stood. "Humanity has proven it holds not just power, but creativity and adaptability beyond our measure. They are not to be conquered. They are to be respected." Even Zarek could not argue with the unanimous vote, but the tension in his face told everyone that accepting this truth was the hardest thing he had ever done. The final mockery. As the humans prepared to leave, Zarek finally spoke again. "Humans," he said slowly, "you have won today. But remember, the Empire never forgets." Rachel smiled politely, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Neither do we, Your Majesty. By the way, you still owe us a cup of coffee." Confused, Zarek frowned. "Coffee?" "Yes," Rachel replied, walking away. "Last time you tried to scan our ships, your machines shut down for 3 hours. That was because we sent them coffee machine manuals instead of ship schematics. We think you'll enjoy the taste." The hall erupted in mixed sounds, some aliens laughing, others gasping. The Emperor stood frozen, unsure whether to be angry or impressed. Back to Earth, as their ship left the Empire's capital, the crew gathered on the observation deck. Through the massive windows, they watched the bright swirl of the galaxy. "Commander." Lewis leaned back in his chair. "Do you think they'll ever stop underestimating us?" Rachel chuckled. No, and that's our greatest advantage. They think we're strange. They think we're unpredictable, and we are. That's why they'll never control us. The stars stretched as the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Empire's space behind. Humanity had not only faced the Galactic Empire, they had laughed in its face and walked away victorious. Epilogue. Weeks later, a message arrived from the Emperor himself. It contained only 3 words: "Send more coffee."